Welcome back to Space Engineers on the Xbox. This is the second of a three-part series looking at starting a vanilla game without mining stone by hand. Space Engineers offers three bare-bones survival start options: the space pod, the Moon Rover, the planetary lander. This second video is going to look at the Moon Rover Start. This is the second easiest start in my opinion because the Moon Rover has sufficient components to build a drill and rotors or hinges to allow subgridding from small grid to large grid, but more about that later. In order to fairly measure the success or failure when looking at these three different starting conditions, we need a set of objections that we must accomplish in order to declare success. Number 1, build a basic refinery. Number 2, build a basic assembler. Number 3, build a drill. Number 4, build an ore detector. And finally, we're going to do this using no more than one backpack load of stone, preferably less. However, in some situations, we may need that one load of stone in order to get things started unlocking the progression tree. With that out of the way, let's be about it. Back in the cockpit, we want to reconfigure the toolbar so we don't accidentally turn on the rover's hydrogen thruster and burn up all of our ice. We can open the toolbar config screen by pressing and holding up on the direction pad. We're going to use the direction pad to navigate to the cockpit icon and press the A button to open the options list. Move down the list to highlight the handbrake on-off option. Once it's highlighted, press the A button to assign it to the toolbar's up position. As you can see now, the handbrake is currently off, but by pressing up on the direction pad, we can turn it on. With the handbrake turned on, the rover won't accidentally start moving around. We can turn the wheels, but we're not able to move forward or backward. Let's get to unlocking the progression tree. Much like we did with the flight seat and the space pod, we're going to grind down the cockpit to get some of the components that we need. Unlike the flight seat, we can get everything we need without completely dismantling the cockpit. In fact, we're going to grind it down to just these last 5 steel plates or so. Now we can get to it through the basic refinery, but we don't really have the parts that we need to build that. Not without seriously crippling the rover anyway. So we're going to get at this from the landing gear, just like we did in the space pod. The landing gear also has the advantage of unlocking the cockpit and wheels for us as well. With the landing gear done, we can grind it back down to regain the components. We can verify that we unlock the cockpit and that it will in turn unlock the drill and other tools. You may remember that one of the shortcuts for unlocking blocks is to grind them down below functional and rebuild them to get the credit. And just like that, we've unlocked more blocks. We've got access to the block tools, drill, welder, and grinder, as well as assorted thrusters and some weapons. Let's get this drill built so that we can start getting some resources. First, we need to gather some components. We can get most of what we need from the 2 spotlights and the 2 front thrusters. Now that we've gathered a bunch of components, let's go ahead and start building the drill. We're going to attach the drill directly to the front of the cockpit. The drill will be able to pass the stone it mines through the cockpit to the survival kit for processing. We can get the steel plates from the armor blocks on the rover. Most of them are not structural and we can take what we need. Finally, the computer that we need we can take from the antenna here at the back. With the drill done, let's set up the rover's toolbar. Hold the direction pad to the right to open the toolbar config menu. Press the right bumper to move to the block tools category. Since the drill is already highlighted, we can just press the A button to add it to the toolbar. Let's go get some stone. Press up on the direction pad to unlock the brakes, and let's head over to the small rise. Before we start drilling and mining stone, let's configure the survival kit. Press the view button to open the inventory screen. Then pull the right trigger twice to open the production panel. The survival kit has the unique ability to both refine stone into ingots and create a limited selection of components and tools. We're going to tell the survival kit that we want 1,000 units of gravel or ingots by using the direction pad to highlight the ingots object in the blueprints list on the left. Then we'll press both bumpers and the A button to put 1,000 units into the production queue. Without stone to process, the survival kit will not start working. So let's get some stone. Don't forget to press right on the direction pad to make the drill the active weapon. This ties it to the right and left triggers on the controller. Take note of the rover's mass in the lower right-hand corner. By keeping track of the changes here, we can estimate how much stone that we've pulled into the rover. We're starting at 14,500 kilograms. Let's get mining. Okay, we're up to a little over 21,000 kilograms. We've picked up just about 6,000 kilos of stone. We'll let the survival kit work on that while we look at the next upgrade to the rover, a cargo container. In addition to greater storage capacity, building a cargo container will unlock conveyor blocks for managing inventory. We're still carrying the interior plate from the spotlights and other components from the thrusters that we ground down. Let's use these parts to place the medium cargo container and start building. The remaining components we'll add to our build planner and order them up from the survival kit. Okay, these are done. Let's finish the cargo container. With that done, let's fill it up. We're starting at just over 15,000 kilograms. Let's see if we can get up to around 30,000. That'll be about 15,000 kilos of stone for the survival kit to process. Look at that, just over 30K. So far we've mined roughly 21,000 kilos of stone without touching the hand drill. We need to start looking at some other upgrades to the rover. You may have noticed that the moon is not particularly flat or level. We're going to build a small platform that we can park the rover on in order to continue upgrading its capabilities. We have two choices of blocks to use to build the platform, armor blocks or interior walls. We are going to use interior walls because the interior plates they require use less iron than the steel plates used by armor blocks. If we look at the production menu, we can see that steel plates use 7 kilograms of iron, whereas the interior plates only use 1 kilogram of iron. So a 3x6 platform made from interior plates will only use 18 kilograms of iron, while the same platform made from steel plates would require 126 kilograms of iron. At this early stage of the game, that's a pretty significant savings in resources. Let's go ahead and order 20 plates to build our platform. Rovers and space engineers do a much better job of transitioning from ground or voxel to blocks if the blocks are embedded in the ground. We're going to place our interior plates on this slope so that the platform will merge smoothly with the ground voxels. With the rover up on the platform, we're going to remove this center row of blocks to get access to the underside. Our interest down here is to get the components out of this hydrogen thruster while it's easily accessible. In addition, while we're here, we'll also reinforce the gaps in the under armor. Okay, we're ready to start building our large grid blocks, the basic refinery and the basic assembler. However, we have to make a choice. The first option is to build on the platform that the rover is sitting on. This has the advantage of being both easy and simple. The two primary disadvantages that it suffers from is that it will be static and needs a power source. Solar panels only work while the sun is up, so we'll need to focus on unlocking power generation and storage systems to supplement them. The second option is to add these blocks directly to the rover using subgrids. This has the advantage of providing power via the rover's battery and keeping us mobile to explore the moon. The major disadvantage is the increased complexity of joining the two different grid types. We're going to go with option 2. I prefer to remain mobile and not tied to specific location if we can avoid it, especially if we're playing on a server with other players. In order to build a hybrid grid, we need access to rotors or hinges which are still locked in the progression tree. We can unlock them by building either a battery, which we can't do without the basic assembler to make the power cells, or by building a solar panel. Technically a wind turbine would also work, but that just doesn't make sense on the moon. So let's build us a solar panel. Don't worry about where to place it, we're going to grind it down right away so it doesn't restrict our movement or visibility. With that done, we can verify that we have access to the blocks we need. Yep, there they are, rotors and hinges. We could use a hinge to connect large grid blocks, however I prefer to use the advanced 3x3 rotor. It is more compact and uses fewer components to be functional. The only part that we cannot get from our survival kit is the small steel tube. Fortunately, we can grab it from the antenna that we stole the computer from for our drill. Now we need to get ready to add the large grid advanced rotor part to our rotor. This will allow us to build the basic refinery onto the rover and pass ores, ingots, and components from one section to the other. This is where the complexity starts to kick in. The game will allow you to replace a missing rotor part on a rotor, or even add a small rotor head with a simple click of a button in the control panel. However, while the game will let you add a large grid rotor part to a small grid rotor, it will not do it with the click of a button. We're going to have to get creative. I found that building a cage like this around the rotor base helps align the large grid rotor part to the small grid rotor. The guide cage needs to have one block of space on all sides of the rotor and come out at least 3 blocks from the front. This sloped armor helps the rotor part slide into place. With that done, there is one more piece of work to do. While the rotor doesn't have a button labeled Add Large Head, it does have an attach button. If we have a large rotor part properly aligned with the rotor, we can use this button to attach it. Because we don't have a good way to both place the rotor part and to press the attach button at the same time, we're going to use a timer block to push the button for us. Go ahead and open up the control panel and find the timer block. We may need to click on the eye to make hidden blocks visible in order to find it. Next, we need to select the Setup Actions button in the menu by pressing the A button on our controller. This opens the toolbar config panel that we've used previously. First, we're going to find the advanced rotor. Pressing the A button on the controller opens this action menu. Use the direction pad to highlight the attach command and press the A button to add it to the toolbar below. Next, press the B button to close the advanced rotor's action menu and then use the direction pad to highlight the timer block. Press the A button to open the action menu, then highlight and select the Trigger Now action to add it to the toolbar. Great! When we turn on the timer block, this will act like somebody clicking the attach button over and over and over and over and over again. Pressing the B button will get us back to the control panel. Activate the timer by clicking the Trigger Now button. Alright, let's go ahead and add the large rotor head. Grab a few more steel plates from the rover, then hover over to the back. Select the advanced rotor part 3x3, then press the left bumper and X button at the same time to switch from small grid to large grid. The fun part is getting into position so that it falls towards the back of the rover and gets caught in the cage. Just a heads up, this could take more than one try in order to get it to hit correctly. The cage helps, but doesn't mean it's going to work every time. If we do it correctly, the rotor will fall into the cage and then snap square to the rotor. Like that. Let's grind away the cage and put as many steel plates into the rotor part as we can. Okay, back to the control panel to get the rotor lined up to 0 degrees. With the control panel open, we want to find the advanced rotor at the top of the list. Select it by pressing the A button. We can see that we're pretty close to 0 already, with the current angle displayed at 359 degrees. Let's give the rotor a little bit of velocity past 0 so that we can pull it back to 0. Whoops, that was a little faster than I'd intended. No worries. We can still scroll the menu and set the upper limit to 0 degrees. By doing this, the current angle automatically shifts to negative degrees as it gets closer to 0. Now that we're at 0 degrees, we set the rotor lock to keep it from rotating and set the velocity to 0 just in case the rotor lock gets turned off by accident. I like to set the rotor to 0 degrees so that anything we build onto the rotor head will be square to the rest of the rover. This helps with balance by keeping the center of mass in a reasonably predictable line, which improves stability and control. Speaking of, let's hop into the cockpit for a moment and look at the rover's mass before we build the refinery. Down in the right hand corner, we can see that it's just over 17,000 kilograms. Let's place the basic refinery so that it's facing the front of the rover, as this leaves us with 2 attachment points on the back of the refinery that can be used to attach the basic assembler and other blocks. We're going to add the missing components to the build planner and let the survival kit manufacture them while we go back to the cockpit. Even though the refinery is unfinished, the game engine gives it credit for its full mass, and we can see that the rover's mass is nearly 20,000 kilograms now. The refinery accounts for right around 2,500 kilograms and is hanging off the back of the rover. And that's before we add any ore from mining or other blocks. This is going to make the rover very back heavy and prone to tipping, especially in the moon's lighter gravity. In order to offset this, we're going to build a pair of outriggers and move the rear wheels further back and out. This will give us more stability, preventing the rover from tipping back and smashing the refinery on the ground. We will build off the remnants of the rotor cage we built earlier, adding one more block to each end before heading backwards. We want a total of 7 small blocks between the arms to give us enough clearance to get around the refinery. The arms are going to extend so that they are even with the back of the refinery. This will put the refinery's mass well within the support of the wheels. With the armor blocks all welded up, we can add the suspensions. There is no functional difference between the right and left wheels. In fact, the rover comes with 4 right wheels. Ultimately, the difference is cosmetic only, changing the directions of the tire tread. That being said, I prefer the aesthetics of correctly aligned right-left wheels. After the suspension frameworks are in place, we can then start grinding down the original wheels for parts. You can see as we grind down the old wheels, the back end of the rover drops to the ground. If we had removed the old wheels before building the outriggers and suspension frameworks, there is a good chance that we wouldn't have been able to add the new wheels and suspensions, because there wouldn't have been enough clearance for the new wheels to spawn when the suspensions were placed. Okay, now that the wheels are done, we're going to remove the platform, weld up the refinery, mine a bunch of stone, and then we'll come back and get the basic assembler installed. Let's go ahead and place the assembler. With only one conveyor port on the basic assembler, it's really tempting to attach it directly to the conveyor port on the basic refinery, like this. However, if we do that, we're not going to have any way to access and remove parts built by the assembler. Instead, we'll mount it high, like this, because it will give us access to the conveyor ports on both the basic assembler and the basic refinery. And while we wait for the survival kit to build us the components, let's put a cargo container here that will act as both a storage unit and a pass-through, giving us easy access to the conveyor network. The cargo container needs metal grids and small steel tubes, which we'd normally need a basic assembler for. However, we can use the metal grids from the hydrogen thruster we ground down earlier. The small steel tubes are going to be a bit trickier, but we can get 15 of them from this conveyor junction that we've been slowly exposing, along with most of the interior plates and other components that we need. In fact, this whole area is full of blocks with useful components in them. Before we go crazy clearing this all out, we need to move the gyroscope to somewhere a little more secure than on top of a parachute hatch that we want to grind down. Alright, there we go. With it on top of the survival kit, we've moved it a little closer to the rover's center of mass, and we've attached it to a block that we really don't want to remove as well. As long as we're here, let's grind down the beacon and rebuild it to unlock the antenna blocks as a bonus. Okay, let's clear out the rest of this. With all of those blocks cleared out of there, we want to reconnect the cockpit to the survival kit and the O2H2 generator. Keeping it connected will keep the cockpit pressurized so that our chute's hydrogen and oxygen tanks refill when we're seated. It will also let us continue using the drill to mine ore and pass it through the refinery in the back. Alright, there weren't quite enough components there to fully finish the cargo container. We still need 11 construction components, 1 display, and 3 small steel tubes. Before we can finish building this, we have to finish the basic assembler. The survival kit should be done building those components by now, so let's grab them and weld up the assembler. With that done, we can pull all of the refined ingots from the survival kit and refinery and move them to the assembler. Now we can use the build planner to have the basic assembler manufacture the components we need to finish the cargo container. That should do it. The rover comes equipped with a small grid ore detector, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's head up top. At this point, we have successfully achieved all of our goals for this video. Built the basic refinery, check. Built the basic assembler, check. Built the drill, check. Built-in ore detector? We didn't really need to do it because there was already one here. Finally, we didn't mine any stone by hand. Just like we did with the space pod, we're going to do a little extra credit and remove the respawn designation from the rover too. We used interior plate to build a new platform large enough to accommodate the expanded rover, and with the rover parked on the platform, we're ready to add a large grid rotor. Just like we did to attach the basic refinery to the rover, we're going to use a large grid rotor to connect the rover to the planetary surface. We're going to go ahead and grind the large rotor part off the top so we can add a small rotor head. In order to interact with this grid, we'll need to build a block with an interface, and a control panel is the cheapest way to do it. While the control panel is highlighted yellow, we can press the X button to open the control panel. Even though the rotor entry in the list is marked incomplete and colored red, we can still use the Add Small Head button and the rotor lock option. The small head is a small grid block, making it compatible with the blocks on our rover. The rotor lock prevents the rotor from spinning freely if we bump it. We're going to build a docking arm onto the rotor with the merge block on the end, and we're going to build a shorter arm with the merge block onto the rover. I'm using the 3x3 merge blocks instead of the 1x1 merge blocks that were added in the Most Wanted update, because I think they're easier to align between the two grids. Okay, let's move the rover around until we get the merge blocks to connect. Like that. Now that we're connected to a grid that's buried in the voxel, this should remove the respawn pod indicator. Let's go ahead and disconnect the merge blocks from the rover and back off the platform. As you can see, the respawn pod indicator is no longer following us, and we don't have to worry about the rover being deleted if you log off of the server. I hope you're finding this video series useful and informative. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The last video in the series will look at the planetary lander and the challenges associated with not using the hand drill on a planet. Have a great game. We'll be back soon.